The Knicks are toast. The Rangers might be after tonight. And the New York Mets, well, their season's over, and it's not even Memorial Day weekend. We're talking all that, plus Montclair High School girls softball when the three wise men return. And welcome to a Thursday morning AM edition of the Three Wise Men, -2. Dennis and Al, who are normally with us, are on assignment. So the co-host responsibilities will be handled by our dear friend, Daily News beat writer for the New York Knicks, provocateur on the Daily News Live show, Frank Isola.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad that the other two guys are gone, especially Dennis. Sometimes he could be a little too much, but that's why we love him. But I'm glad to be here. And now, you know what? Maybe eventually just be the two wise men.
Hey, listen.
Or the one wise guy plus you.
Hey, listen, last time you were here, which was a couple weeks ago, you were boldly predicting a Knicks victory. The Pacers couldn't score. And lo and behold, the Knicks are playing golf.
Yeah, well, I never said I knew what I was talking about, but it's very interesting the way the Pacers played, number one. Number two, with the Knicks, very disappointing ending to their season, because when you finish second in the Eastern Conference, you're lined up to play the top team, which was Miami. So the Knicks had home court advantage. They blew that in Game 1 by losing Game 1, which was huge. They didn't win a game in Indiana, and really the problem in Indiana, listen, Tyson Chandler was a major problem. He was terrible in the series. J.R. Smith was terrible. But Carmelo Anthony, in the fourth quarter of games 3, 4, and 6, those are the games in Indiana, just didn't do enough. And now it turns out he has a shoulder injury, which who knows, a partially torn labrum. This could be something which, you know, they're going to give it a couple of weeks to rest, heal. If it doesn't, he'll need surgery. So now you're talking about a guy who will show up in October for training camp coming off of surgery and already for next season not starting off as well as you'd like.
Well, you know, it's funny with the Knicks. Carmelo now, you broke the story actually, that had a small tear in his left shoulder. Tyson Chandler played not only injured but sick throughout the playoffs. Yeah. J.R. Smith, once he threw that infamous elbow, was a shell of himself. Yep. Jason Kidd didn't score a basket in a month, right? Yep. The ill-advised Kenyon Martin ruse about coming dressed in black. I heard Glenn Grunwald yesterday talking about bringing Marcus Camby back. So there's a lot of stuff that went on during the playoffs. They're talking about bringing back a 40-something-year-old Marcus Camby. I guess Jason Kidd's talking about coming back. How are they getting better?
And that's a big thing for the Knicks. And what bothers you, too, about the Knicks, when you think about what they did, I actually don't begrudge what they did. They were going to go for it this year. Dwight Howard was out of Orlando. Derrick Rose was coming off a knee surgery. So the Eastern Conference was weaker, and they did finish with the second-best record. And, oh, by the way, they beat Miami 3 times during the season.
Having said that, all of a sudden the Eastern Conference, which seemed weaker, it seems like it's going to get better now. The Pacers are for real. They got a bunch of guys that no one in New York ever heard of, but all of a sudden everyone knows. You've got the Bulls who are going to have Rose back next year. The Heat are the Heat. So where do the Knicks fit in with that?
But here's my point, though. They went older, which in a lot of ways, you know what, you do win with older guys, but they were too old. So by the end of the year, Kurt Thomas got cut because he had a broken foot. Rasheed Wallace retired because he had a broken foot. Marcus Camby, who's got a 3-year contract, by the way, never played. Jason Kidd went the last 9 games without scoring. And then you look at a guy like Kenyon Martin. To me, the playoffs changed going in right after Game 4 in Boston. Jason Terry of the Celtics was running his mouth. The Knicks then decided we're going to wear black to Game 5 because it's a funeral. Them losing Game 5, you think about how important it was for an older team. So they had to turn around 2 days later and play in Boston, a nip-and-tuck kind of Game 6, which they, just barely won. And then 36 hours later, they turn around. They're playing the Eastern Conference, the second round against Indiana. They lose that home game to a younger team. They, yes, they did win Game 2. It was tied at 1-1, but they really never caught up. That Game 5, when they showed up with their, no focus, too worried about wearing black, like they're, like it's, if a high school team had done that or a college team, you'd excuse it for being young and mature.
You'd slap their wrist, and say, but the Knicks, the oldest team in the league,
acting like that.
Right. No, it was ridiculous. Now listen, you got the Garden, who the Knicks are done. The Rangers are on the verge of being done. If they lose tonight, it's done. So, you and I being big Dolan fans, the Garden's going to be dark, which is, we were trying to figure out on the way over here, if the Rangers lose tonight, more playoff games last year with the Knicks and Rangers, or more playoff games this year? And I think we figured they actually got more out of last year because the Rangers went deeper.
Yeah, they did. But with the Knicks though did play, what was it altogether, 6 home games this year, which for them was
they
pretty
played
good.
2 last year.
Yep.
Right? Lost
Just
in
2.
this, right. They played 2 last year. They got 6 this year. But the Rangers played at least 8 or 9 last year.
But, so are you trying to say that Jim Dolan's going to be on the corner 30?
No. I'm not saying that. But listen, anything that can go wrong for James Dolan's a good day for me.
You know what's funny too about the Garden? You're
the most hated man at the Garden.
They're in year 3 of the renovation, or as they like to call it, the transformation of the Garden, which is
the transformation of taking people's money out of their pockets.
No, but that's my point. It's the transformation. That's a fancy way of saying the average Joe has been priced out of Madison Square Garden.
The transformation is you'll see nobody that's a transit worker, a bus driver,
that's right,
ever being allowed in the Garden again.
And you know what's interesting too? When the second half of a Knick game starts, the lower part of the lower bowl, that's where a lot of people have access to suites.
So it empties out.
They leave at halftime to get something to drink, something to eat. The third quarter starts. It's a good 5 or 6 minutes of basketball time, not regular time. It's about 20 minutes before everyone starts coming back. So why are you going to the game when you're only worried about eating and drinking? But I'll tell you what, Jim Dolan's not worried about it because he's printing money.
Cha-ching. Well, it actually reminds you of what's going on with Yankee Stadium.
That's right.
And to a smaller degree, Citi Field, because no one goes to Citi Field now anyway. But when they did, I've often said that George Steinbrenner must be rolling in his grave.
Yeah.
He could not
they priced out fans.
He could not. It's not that they priced out fans. I don't think he even cared about that. But I think what he would care about is when you get a view of the seats behind home plate and in the wings along first and third base against the Boston Red Sox or against now the Baltimore Orioles, you see scores and scores and scores of empty seats. It would have driven him crazy. I'm convinced he would not have wanted this.
No, I agree with you. It's funny, too. After they played Game 1 against Indiana, Jeff Van Gundy came over to me. Jeff obviously had been the coach for the Knicks for a long time, took them to the finals. He said to me, he goes, did it feel like a playoff game, really? And you know what, to be honest with you, because you're kind of pricing out that real, hardcore Knick fan, it's just a different kind of atmosphere. That's not to say the crowd isn't loud.
It's loud.
But the way that it used to be, it's not the same anymore.
Well, it's a different animal. It's a different animal attending the games.
Yeah. People going to the Knick games are going because they want to see celebrities. They want to tell people they went to a Knick game. They're really not as in love with basketball or in love with the team as you'd like to think.
And can Spike Lee sit down? I mean, look, he is the unofficial team mascot. All right, but I watch I haven't gone to a Knick game, but I do watch them because I have to, because I have a show to do. Otherwise, I wouldn't watch them. But I do watch them. And when the entire arena is seated, there's Spike Lee marching up and down the sideline, directing the offense and or the defense, and it's like, here I am. Everybody look at me. I mean, can the guy sit down? And what about the guy that sits behind him?
Yeah.
Who can't tap him on the shoulder and say, Spike, sit your ass down. Yeah.
In Indiana before Game 6, here's the juice that Spike has. He's on the court as the Knicks are warming up. Now, he's in this wacky suit.
Orange. And
he's got like high water pants to show his orange socks. He's got the jacket. But he's walking around with like a piece of wood. I don't know what the heck.
What's the wood?
And he's calling players over to rub the piece of wood as they're on the layup line.
It's got to be an inside joke between Spike and his buddies. I mean, and I also love at the end of the game, before the game is actually over, if the game has been decided, oftentimes you'll see Spike go up to one of the opposing players who he's buddies with and give him a little hug. I mean, come on. Listen. It's the Knicks obviously embrace it, so why not?
Yeah, and let's face it too. The NBA long ago embraced the whole idea of the celebrity fan. But when you watch a lot of these games, even when you watch the Super Bowl, they're always showing which celebrities are now at the game.
Right.
The NBA really was the first to do that, to kind of make it the be seen type of place, and that's the NBA really had fostered that culture.
When we come back, we're going to switch gears and talk about the New York baseball teams. Back in a minute.
Now it's time for This Week in Bad Stats.
Bad stats?
Horrible stats. Here goes. 132.
That's how many batters struck out 4 times in one game last season.
Wow, very good. Here's a tough one, though. 3 and 4.
No idea.
That's how many kids have witnessed bullying. 3 out of 4.
That's not a good stat.
No, it's not, but it can change. Kids want to help, but they don't know how. Visit stopbullying.gov and give them the tools they need to help prevent bullying.
There are plenty of safe ways kids can help at stopbullying.gov.
And we're back, the 3 wise men minus the two uglier wise men, and here with the best-looking wise man ever, Frank Isola, Emmy Award-winning Frank Isola.
Actually,
Daily News Live.
I did win an Emmy Award. That's why I'm wondering how come I can't get a headset like you, because I think you're talking about me in the back to the control room.
There were
making fun of me.
There were predictions from another famous talk show host that 3 could become 2, and here we are. It has come to pass.
I know people are probably wondering what happened to the two of them.
Hey,
Where are they buried?
what's going on over at Citi Field? I mean, the Mets were not expected to win more than 70, 75 games, but did anyone in their wildest imagination think the Mets season would literally be done before Memorial Day weekend?
You know what? I actually think some people did think that, and the Mets season comes down to one thing. Every 5 days, Matt Harvey pitches.
Yeah, and Matt Harvey did not come through yesterday.
I know. Well,
and he finally faced a major league lineup. Listen, I'm going to be the guy that's going to throw water on the fire, all right? Or I'm going to make a good situation seem bad. That's what I like to do anyway. I always see the bad in things.
That takes a special quality.
Well, but that's who I am. And so, listen, they had a bobblehead day. Well, they didn't have a bobblehead day. They had a T-shirt day for Matt Harvey on his second start this year, his third start, okay? He is, as Sports Illustrated said, the Dark Knight of Gotham. I understand the guy is going to be great, but can we just let it breathe a little bit? Is it a bit premature? He faced the Reds yesterday. They're clearly the best team he's faced. Gave up 9 hits in 6 innings, 4 runs, which over 9 innings equates to about 5. Okay, so he had his worst start of the year.
And you know, it's funny. I did another show. This was in March. Okay, another show they don't get paid for, by the way. And they were talking about. They kept referring to Matt Harvey as a phenom, and I was like, well, hang on a second. First of all, he hasn't even pitched yet. Dwight Gooden in his rookie year, that was a phenom. Yeah. That was like a once-in-a-lifetime kind of thing.
Vita Blue was a phenom.
Thank you. It's like, let's relax calling a guy a phenom before he ever pitches. But hasn't this always been a problem with the Mets where they overrate their talent as a way to sell it to the public, but then the Met fans always overrate. Their pitchers are always going to be the greatest thing. Go back to, what was the player's name? David West?
Sure.
The pitcher?
Sure.
But then look, what about when it was the Pulsifer, Paul Wilson, Jason Isringhausen?
There's a host of them.
They were going to change the organization. The Mets always have a habit of doing this. So let Matt Harvey the fact that he's in the rotation, pitching, is not always going to win, but let him kind of,
he's terrific. But they're hanging their hat on this guy.
Because they have nothing else.
They have nothing else, and they're also hanging their hat on this guy's going to start the All-Star game. Which, listen, if I'm Clayton Kershaw, he who's done it now for a couple of years and is having another terrific year, but I have something to say about that.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and that's the thing with the Mets.
Did I say his name right?
Yes, Clayton Kershaw. The thing about the Mets is everything about them is gearing towards the fact that they're hosting the All-Star game.
This is their event.
Exactly. The home run derby, the celebrity softball game, which I heard that you haven't confirmed.
I have not told them whether I'm coming or not.
But yet. You could be part of that. But everything, even their whole ticket thing, was all about this All-Star game, which the All-Star game lasts one day.
No, it doesn't last one day. You
2
have
days.
The home run derby.
But my point is,
it's must-see TV.
But what are you building toward as the Mets? If you're a Met fan, you keep hearing all this nonsense. Your ownership hasn't come through for you. The players that you thought were going to be good players, every year it's the same thing. And now, you know what happens? Instead of surviving longer, where there's a season until like maybe September, God forbid August, there's not even a season in May anymore.
No, there's not. And Terry Collins might be overmatched. Terry Collins, the warts on the team are showing, and I think Terry Collins' warts are showing. And their general manager is going to start feeling the heat soon, too. I mean, there has to be something to look forward to for next year. Right now, other than Matt Harvey, an aging David Wright, who's a good player.
He's not that old.
Well, what is he, 29, 30 years? Well, no, he's older than that.
I think yeah.
Seems like he's been around forever.
Well, he came up as a young player.
Yeah. But, I mean, they've got 2 or 3 guys. Their first base situation with Ike Davis is becoming embarrassing.
Yeah.
I'm embarrassed for the guy.
Yeah.
It's almost like a Jason Bay situation, but in reverse, because this guy's never had a career, although they talk about him like he's this brilliant first baseman, and I have never seen a guy struggle like this guy.
I always, what makes me laugh, though, is when you compare the Mets to the Yankees, and forget like the history and all the other stuff, which the Yankees blow them away, but the Yankees, it's always about not just making the playoffs, but to them a successful season is getting to a World Series. Now, if you're in the World Series, who knows what could happen.
All bets are off.
But for the Mets, it's almost like, can we be competitive? And then next year, we're going to be better. That's always their focus. The Yankees, it's just about winning, and everyone from ownership down to the last player on the team, that's what they think about all the time. The Mets are always thinking about next season.
It's hard for me to believe. I sat in the stadium, I'm trying to remember, I think it was 2006, when Andy Chavez made
Yeah.
one of the probably the greatest catch I've ever seen
Yep.
against the Cardinals, and I think it was the 7th inning. And I mean, I've never seen a better catch. And the Mets were, a few outs away from going to the World Series. And what's happened to that franchise since? The collapses in 08 and 09 on the final game of the season, which were hard to imagine.
Yeah.
I think they had like a 6-game lead in 07
Yep.
and blew it, and then both years didn't make the playoffs in the final game. And then what's happened since? It's hard to, with the Madoff stuff and the Wilpons being involved with him. It's almost unimaginable what's happened to this franchise.
When you sometimes, depending on who's pitching, but you'll turn a game on. It's a ghost town at Citi Field.
Oh, which is the best games to go to, by the way.
There's
If you haven't figured it out, guys, this is great if you just like professional baseball, because you can walk up, go into Citi Field, and sit anywhere you want.
Because you and I know what it's like to go into a crowded game, because you and I went to a Yankee playoff game last year, and when
2 years ago.
2 years ago, where we sit on the aisle and it's constant traffic.
Why can't people go to a game and sit?
Where's everybody going?
I go to a game, and when I actually get to my seat, I sit there. I don't have to get up and go to the bathroom 6 times, and I don't have to go get beers every second inning. But it's amazing to me, and we were commenting on people can't sit still.
But we also sat in the section with the
players' wives,
the Detroit Tigers' wives, which is good.
Yeah, that was the yin and yang.
They're all dating. They're either dating or married to young, good-looking women. Who would have ever thought that?
That's shocking for a minute. And listen, the Yankees just keep doing what they keep doing, which is just win.
Yep.
And again, before the season started, the Yanks will win 80 games. The Yanks will win 83 games. I made a bet with a buddy of mine in Starbucks, 90 wins this year, and I'm looking very good. And Mariano, 17 for 17.
And doesn't it tell you, it's funny when you think about baseball, and they always talk about pitching, and yet all everybody taled about with the Yankees was
lack
no
of hitting.
Jeter, no Teixeira, right?
They might have as many home runs this year at this time as they had last year.
As long as their pitching is keeping them in games, and what you talked about with Mariano, who's been phenomenal, to me there's no way he's going to retire, nor should he. He's still at the top of his game. He's still elite. But what the Yankees have done, they plugged in the right holes, but their pitching is held up, and if your pitching holds up, the rest takes care of itself.
Listen, Vernon Wells has always been and still is a professional hitter. Travis Hafner, professional hitter. Overbay, terrific player. Who's going to end up sitting when Teixeira comes back?
And you still have, let's remember, Cano should be the best player in the team. Now, he hasn't been that in the playoffs, and certainly wasn't last year, but he's still in the lineup. So Jeter has the bigger name, A-Rod has the bigger name. But Cano is the one that's been healthy and playing, and that helps your lineup.
And unlike the role players they had last year, the Andrew Jones of the world, who
did well for them.
Who did very well, but he tailed at the end of the year. I don't see it in Vernon Wells or Hafner. I look at their swings and I go, my God, these guys have great swings. They seem to have a lot of giddy-up left in their step. And I expect them to play well all year long. And I'd be shocked if the Yankees don't go north of 90 wins this year.
And I also think, you get a lot of these players coming to the Yankees. And, I know especially people don't want to hear it around the country because they think you're, all obnoxious New Yorkers and everything. But there is something about playing for that organization in that stadium. And, I think these guys that came there, especially towards the end of their career.
The good Lord, thank you. I thank the good Lord for making me a Yankee, Joe DiMaggio.
That's right.
Hey, when we come back, enough of the professional sports. We're going to talk about Montclair High School girls softball with head coach Dan Roberts.
We are rolling.
All right, Mama's going to bring you home. Mama's going to bring you home. No.
Challenge your kids to be active and eat healthy.
Let's see what you can do. Let's go.
Search We Can for ideas on how to get healthy together.
And we're back, the 3 wise men minus the 2 ugly ones. And keeping this a Montclair theme, we have Emmy Award-winning Frank Isola, who lives in Montclair, and head girls softball coach at Montclair High School, Dan Roberts, who's not only the girls softball coach, but an assistant on the state championship football team, is joining us to sort of give us a little recap on the season that just ended for us, talk about his state championship. In fact, Coach, while you got it, show the ring. I don't know if the cameras can pick that up, but that's the Montclair 2013 state championship ring.
That's where our tax money's going.
That's where our tax money's going.
Yeah, right.
Coach, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And you had never been a head coach in softball before, so this was an interesting year for us because we play in the Super Essex, which is one of the toughest, counties to play in all the state. We were a young team. We had 1 senior on the team, and I think you knew going into the season it was going to be tough. I'm not sure you knew it was going to be as tough as it was.
Yeah, we definitely. We talked before, and going into the season, definitely knew it was going to be tough. You're right. Didn't think it was going to be that tough. and we got off to a really, really tough start.
I think we were 1-9 or
1-9.
1-10.
We were 1-9 at one point, and we lost to some decent teams, Mount St. Dominic's, Livingston. So it's not like we lost to bad teams. But I'm always a positive guy, as you know, and you got to keep that focus and keep that smile on my face. And we worked hard, and a lot of that goes to you and Coach Pete Remicchio, the
Great
other
guy.
assistant coach that I've coached football with for the last few years. And we just kept working, kept plugging along, and that seemed to be my motto. My mantra throughout the season. We just got to keep plugging away, and we did. And in our last 13 games, I believe we were 6-7, with the loss to Livingston in the state playoffs.
And what was more impressive than the fact that we were basically 500 over the second half of the season was the way the games were played. In other words, the first half of the season, we were getting mercied or run ruled, whatever you want to say. It seemed like every game.
Sure.
We weren't competitive. We played those same teams the second time around. We were losing games instead of 17-0 or 15-0. We were losing 3-0.
Sure.
We were losing 4-2.
Yeah.
We played much more competitively against those same teams, and then obviously our record indicated it. We ended up 7-17, and there was a point there where we thought we'd win 1 or 2 games.
Sure. No, it got lean. We definitely thought we were going to struggle, but again, like I said, you guys did a great job. The girls really started coming around. One of my things is I'd always say play for inside the fences, not outside the fences. Right. And I'll leave that up to your own interpretation, but I think I had my real moment when we beat West Orange 2-1.
Right.
And I teared up. I'm a real emotional guy. But that was a point where I really recognized that the girls played for each other. They played for us. They didn't play for everything outside. And from that point on, we had some wins before that, in the county tournament. But that game, I think, was the game that really
Well, and West Orange had run ruled us the first time we played him, and we came back and beat them.
They beat us,
and then we had a last inning rally against Montclair Academy, who had a very nice season
we
this
just
year.
kept going.
Two out rally to beat them. We beat Newark Academy, which, by the way, is 20-7.
That was a big win for us as well.
So we had some very quality wins, and just as you said, the kids started playing for themselves and each other, not what was going on around them.
All right, when you're coaching football, besides the the male and the female dynamic about it, football, it's a different type of mentality when you're going out there. How are you changed as a coach from coaching football to when you're going to coach a softball team where it can't just always be about rah-rah, because it's much more individual?
I think you got to be a little more emotional. I got practice from that because I do have 2 daughters at home and a wife, and I even think our pets are female. So I live in a house full of females. So you have to be a little more emotional. Yeah. And I think this is the one thing that Coach Remicchio, we call him Coach Meach, and I would talk about all the time. In the football field, it's common to go out there and kick the kids in the what.
Yeah.
You can't really do that in softball.
Yeah.
You have to listen more. You do have to listen more, and you have to relay messages a little differently. Yeah. And I don't want to, it's not a sexist thing, Frank. Yeah. It's just it's boys are different.
It's a different athlete.
It's a different athlete.
It's a different athlete.
He's married with 2 daughters, and he listens a lot. He's a smart guy.
Well,
you know the saying, right?
Exactly.
Happy wife, happy
the big
life.
challenge we have in town is that we have a tremendous lacrosse program, so we lose athletes to lacrosse.
Yeah,
and we have a tremendous soccer program. Now, even though soccer is played in the fall and softball is played in the spring, and Frank, you can attest to this because you have a daughter who's coming up to the freshman level next year, these kids all play club soccer.
Yeah.
And a lot of them hesitate to play softball because it interferes with their club soccer program. Mm-hmm. So we have to really identify the athletes at an early age, get them playing softball, get them excited about softball, and try to keep them, because that's been our biggest challenge. And his daughter's going to be a prime example of that next year, because she's a talented athlete who's coming up, who's a good softball player. Will she play 4 years of softball, or will we lose her to soccer, as we have a lot of other kids?
Well, speaking of that, talk about your best player on the team, who is able to do both and is going to go to LaSalle
Yep,
to play soccer, but still an outstanding softball player.
Sure. It's hard. I mean, I think a lot of it has to do with getting involved with the youth programs, and I know if I've done that, throughout this season, it's sort of like they didn't even know high school softball existed, which is kind of shocking. It is tough. The club does really dominate, club soccer, or club sports in general will dominate the student athlete, because the clubs don't care. Who cares? You have a high school game. This is your club team, and you see that in a couple other sports out there. I know there's been some issues, and it's something we have to deal with. But I think if we can just remain the way that we're going, and you put a good product on the field, I think the girls will play. You know, I've been more visible, like I said, out in the community and gone to some of the traveling games and the rec games just to be more of the face of the program. You know, we have to get more involved with them, clinics, and, you know, we're going to get together a summer league where we're going to try to identify some of the youth and try to develop them. You know, again, it's like if the kid, I shouldn't say kid, but if the athlete wants to go and play on their club team because that's their future, then I can't stop them because that's their future. But if we can identify, like,
but we can try to influence them.
We can definitely try to influence them.
We can try to influence.
We got to do it at a young age. You know, we tried to do that with the seniors this year, and they were already gone. They were out the door.
Yeah, and the one senior that stayed, who Frank was referring to, was Deja Davis. She's going to be playing at LaSalle soccer, but she was able to sort of balance both. Played softball for us this year and was a tremendous leader for us. Tremendous. And Coach did a great job giving her a moment in the Livingston game, walking out to the mound as she was at shortstop. The entire team met him at the mound, and in the last inning had her leave the field to really a standing ovation for four years well.
And you said, we were talking about it off air, even the Livingston parents picked up.
They all knew her. They all knew her.
Because,
again, she had played against a lot of these kids in summer ball. And so the kids on the Livingston squad knew her. So obviously the parents knew her. And when you see an athlete like that on the field, you don't forget her.
And soccer battles. She's
and soccer
really
as well.
Soccer battles
and because actually the shortstop for Livingston is their goalie, Sammy Rothenberg. So she had played against her in 2 sports. So they all knew her, and they were all very respectful of her and appreciated her talent. So it was a really nice moment. So
it was great to have her.
It was. I think the one benefit you had this year was having Deja.
Sure.
Because if you didn't have Deja, it would have made our lives a whole lot more difficult.
It would have.
Let's be honest.
Right. Let's be honest. We probably would have lost some more girls as well. You know, she was a big influence there. But it was great. You know, she's a great kid, great girl. You know, I love her. I've had the fortunates of being able to coach, you know, some really good athletes over the past or go against them. Obviously, these are boys, you know, on the football field. But, you know, Deja can compete right up there with, you know, the Khalif Urbans and, you know,
who's at Temple.
Who's at Temple now playing football, who's like all everything, you know, had, you know, coached against Dwayne Jarrett down at Spotswood many years ago, who made it to the NFL. You know, and Deja's right there.
Yeah.
I mean, she is that type of kid. Like Mike said off the air, she is a competitor, you know, and she just wants to compete.
Makes your job a little bit easier.
It does. It really does. And it's good if we can identify, you know, 14 more other girls like that.
Exactly.
Hey, well, Coach, you did for your first year, you did a fantastic job in a you know, with a team. We're sort of like the Mets. We were a little, you know, we were a little outclassed by some of these teams in terms of talent on the field, but you brought them a long way. It was a pleasure working with you. And as we wrap things up, I have a new premise for this show. We could be calling ourselves the Mod Squad. We could be coming back.
The Mod Squad, sure.
You know, hey,
I'll come back.
You know,
whenever you want.
we got all the makings of the Mod Squad. So, hey, listen.
A female.
For the 3 wise men, Dennis and Al, who are on assignment. Thank you, Frank Isola, for filling in ably. Dan Roberts for joining us. Great year this year for the Mounties, and we'll be back next week for another AM edition.